Hey everybody, this is Marian Cowie Goen.
And this is David Owen.
And this is You Show Me Yours, the podcast where a married couple talks about the movies and TV that they loved before the first date. And today, I was made to watch Blade.
Sorry, you were made to watch. I can't hear you. We're in the club. What were you made to watch?
I was at a frat party where blood rained from the sky.
Yes. We're just gonna let that play in the back. It does this for like 10 minutes.
It adds to everything.
Yes,
really.
it does. Yeah, Blade. Blade is the. I think we've got a little. Sorry, I'm getting a little weird headphone action. I don't think it's on the recording, so I'm only saying this to let my co-host know if I'm acting weird. It's because I'm getting weird crackles. But yeah.
What's your excuse the rest of the time?
Blade, the 1998, actually, we'll turn off that.
Yeah, good call.
Because I think that might be contributing to my problem.
Mm-hmm.
The 1998 superhero movie with Wesley Snipes and Steven Dorff, not Dorff on Golf, which I had to introduce you to.
And I've already forgotten about it because it was just so weird and weird.
Yeah. It's an action horror movie. I mean, there isn't really a whole lot horror about it. Some vampires hiss at people. But yeah, if you've never seen Blade before, it's the story of Blade, who's a Marvel comic books character from the 70s. Who is he is a half vampire. His mother is bitten shortly before his birth, so he gets like a dose of vampire blood, but he's born of a non-vampire, but with so he has quote unquote all of their strengths, but none of their weaknesses.
Yeah, I feel like I need to see a breakdown of this. Like, what's the Punnett square of fully vampire parent plus non-vampire parent plus full gestation plus not, like how does this work? And that, because that's some fast acting vampire serum. If she was bitten in like the 9th month of pregnancy and he still comes out with all his vampire, well, not all, I guess is the point, but a lot of vampire faculties.
Yeah, I would say, I'm sure that they go into it at some point in the comics or wherever else, like vampirism is like, I think they might even talk about this in the second movie, that vampirism is like, it's like a blood virus basically. Mm-hmm. And so her blood is in the process of being infected. So long as he's still attached to the umbilical cord, he's getting her blood supply.
So vampirism crosses the placenta.
Yes, apparently.
Okay.
Somehow. So he ends up being discovered by a character named Whistler, who is like a Van Helsing sort of stand-in, an old wise vampire hunter. He raises him and trains him to hunt vampires, to use his abilities for good. Though he does have one of the vampire weaknesses, which is he still does want to drink blood. So he takes a serum to keep him from doing that, which is like made of some of the in-universe things that vampires don't like or can't tolerate.
And it has to be injected in the neck.
Yes, of course.
In the what is that, the carotid right there?
Jugular? Well, I can't remember. Is the carotid in your leg?
Regardless, I don't want an injection in my neck.
Yes. So he fights vampires, and he moves around from city to city tracking the vampires, and one in particular he's been tracking is Deacon Frost, who's like the new hotness with vampires. He's the young, up-and-coming vampire who is kind of trying to shake things up.
He's so hot right now.
He is so hot right now. That's Deacon Frost. He's so hot right now. He wants an all-out war with the humans. He thinks of humans as vampire food beneath them. And this is a theme. You have a lot of characters in vampire movies, in various vampire universes that have no respect for humans and want to, for lack of a better word, come out into the daylight and show the humans, to stop hiding. Mm-hmm. And we get this sort of standard allusion to what you get in a lot of vampire universes. The vampires have been behind the scenes working with high-level humans, perhaps guiding the history of human events. Puppeteers in the background, whether they're stand-ins for masons or the Illuminati or whatever.
A lot of it is reminding me of They Live. That was
Sure.
that kind of thing there too, right? Like the hidden force, and then humans are helping them.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of things, right? Is it aliens that are doing it? Is it the lizard people that live inside the Hollow Earth? You know, it is a common, or is it humans who happen to be a member of a secret society? Like, it's an extremely common theme for somebody to be puppeteering human history behind the scenes to their own ends. So Whistler and Blade are hunting Frost. And that's where the sort of the events of the movie kick off. Frost is having a conflict with the vampire elders. He wants to, you know, like I said, he wants to go to war with the humans. They want to maintain the status quo. The vampire elders don't respect him because he's not a pure blood, meaning he wasn't born a vampire. He was made a vampire, which somehow within their society makes a difference.
Well, yeah, I don't think that in any of the vampire movies we've watched, there has been the concept of being born a vampire.
Yeah, I think most
For one thing, if you don't age,
right?
How
do
does
you
that
grow up?
work?
Right, and some of these born vampires appear to be in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
But so in the Blade universe, vampires do age. They just
Okay.
age incredibly slowly.
Okay.
So a vampire who looks like he's in his 60s is probably in his like 1,000 years old.
Okay.
And I believe it's later on in this. I can never keep it straight. I know in Underworld, they have like really old vampires that are like thousands of years old, and they're like really decrepit, and they have to go into these like long hibernations and stuff. I want to say they introduced some similar kind of lore in this movie that really old vampires are like elderly people, and they're thousands of years old, and they have to constantly just be resting and stuff.
Okay.
So they do
Much
age.
like actual old people have to be
Right.
constantly resting.
they do age, but then that raises an even bigger question of how long does childhood take?
Yeah.
If it takes you hundreds of years to look like you're in your 40s, how long does it take to go from 0 to 1?
Can I just tell you, if I am on record as saying our son's first year nearly killed me. If that lasted like 10 years,
Yeah, like a decade.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, right.
Although I guess if you're a vampire, you don't need sleep. So,
True.
you know, it would be fine. But this goes against a vampire lore that we are given in Twilight, where Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, who is human,
Right.
and he is he was turned at a young age, whatever. They have a baby, and Renesmee, by the way, combination of Renee and Esme, and someone calls her Nessie after the Loch Ness Monster, which is fantastic. Like, the good can't be fun. Terrible movie, but can't be. Anyway, she grows up very fast.
Yeah.
Maybe because just the movie needed her to.
Sure.
But she like is born, and then within a month she's like a toddler.
Yeah, and maybe in it may be explained in the actual Blade backstory, because again, the vampires that exist in the Blade universe, when they started out in the 70s, it was literally just Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dracula's literally in the Blade comics. He's in a comic called like The Curse of Dracula or something where he debuts. Like, it is the straight up Dracula mythology, wooden stakes, garlic, running water, the whole deal. Because in the 50s and 60s, horror comics were actually really popular, especially in like the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Tales from the Crypt comes from, and the stuff that's in like movies like Creepshow. They're paying homage to like the old. I forget the name of the company. It was one particular company that did a lot of it. So this was Marvel's way of trying to get into the horror comics scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just straight up Dracula rules. But since then, it's evolved a lot. And so, yeah, maybe they explain it. Maybe it is a Twilight sort of, you age fast. Whistler says he found Blade at 12.
Mm-hmm.
Blade is approximately real aged or close to it. We're in 97, 98, and they say he was born in 67. So Snipes appears to be about 30.
Yeah, that's sort
would
of
pass for 30. So
yeah, it's sort of odd they age slowly. Except here's 30-something-year-old Wesley Snipes, who's clearly a full-grown man.
Right,
yeah,
and some
anyway.
of the vampires appear even younger, in their 20s. So it's completely inconsistent, but we'll throw that out for the sake of this synopsis here, which is what we're still trying to get through. So in the events of all this, a doctor who is something with blood,
She's a hematologist. Which is an interesting, like, it's interesting that this comes out in 1998 when I guess we were past like the peak of the AIDS, not crisis, but the public fear about AIDS.
Yeah.
But still, it was
ever present,
and
like,
it
in
was
a lot of ways.
not like it is now, where you're like, oh well, you just have health insurance, you need to take a bazillion pills, and you're fine.
Yeah.
Was still a serious illness, and for her to be someone who studies blood, one assumes she would have some expertise in this, and that AIDS is never brought in. It just strikes me as an omission. But anyway.
Well, and maybe they just didn't want to. They wanted to avoid that whole entanglement, like. We start talking about vampirism as a blood disease, then is it a stand-in for AIDS? Then do we have an obligation to like make our movie about that? And like, should we now do we have to include characters who are analogous to the real life people who are most impacted? AKA, do we have to start working the gay community into our movie?
Oh, sure. I can see why you wouldn't want to touch that.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it seems like a glaring omission. But.
Yeah, but she after an epic club fight scene where the song that we were listening to at the open is present in a vampire club where, as you might expect, they do bloodbaths from sprinklers in the ceiling, which was great.
Although that's similar to, so since the blood is what they feed on, that's similar to I'm in a club and
like a Diet Coke.
Yeah,
shower.
Don't. And then are people licking each other? Or I guess, I don't know, probably there is somewhere where champagne flows from the ceiling. So maybe it's like that.
Sure, yeah.
Which also is gross, but I could see how that would come across as a luxury thing. So
yes. Oh, for sure. And like, an excess thing. And it's young vampires, and the elders explicitly object to these clubs.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a form of rebellion. It's whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so yeah, after this epic fight scene, one vampire is left nailed to a wall and crispy. And he's brought in to the morgue. They see some weird stuff. She's brought down because his blood looks weird. And the vampire, who ends up being Quinn, played by Donald
Logue.
Yeah.
Who is fantastic.
He was the Grounded for Life guy.
Yeah. And he was an ER. And he's been in a bunch of things. You know him if you see him.
Oh, yeah. And he ends up coming back to life, or I guess he was never dead, and biting the other doctor who's present, killing him, and then killing him. We find out later he wasn't really killed. And then he bites her as Blade comes in. So he doesn't drain her fully. He doesn't kill her. He just bites her. So now she's infected. Blade ends up rescuing her. He sees she is also a statuesque black woman, not unlike his mother. And he sort of identifies with her on that level. He's in a hospital. He has this vampire bitten lady. And so he brings her back. They try to cure her with this like garlic infused serum stuff. It's not quite the serum that Blade uses, but it seems related.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work, but she ends up curing herself because she's a smart, capable doctor, and starts kind of working with them throughout the course of the movie. Basically, he has run-ins with Frost and Frost's men, Blade, and in the end, it becomes known that Frost is trying to resurrect an ancient vampire god named Lamagra, and he needs the 12 heads of the vampire families to do this, and Blade. The events of the movie culminate in Frost securing all of the things he needs to resurrect Lamagra. Lamagra is resurrected in the form of Frost, and gives birth to one of the worst special effects of the 90s.
Yeah, pretty bad.
Yeah, we'll talk about the special effects a little bit later. And in the end, Blade manages to win by using a drug that violently reacts which kills human blood, but also now violently reacts with vampire blood. And he ends up killing Frost with this drug that Frost mistakenly thinks is Blade's serum that keeps him from wanting to drink human blood.
Yeah, that was a nice misdirection because there was a point when Blade has the serum with him that keeps his vampirism at bay,
Mm-hmm.
sort of, and Frost thinks that that's what he has, and it's like, haha, that won't save you, and you're like, but it's different colors, so if you've been paying attention, you're like, oh, that's
like you
not...
as the audience know. Yeah, and they just assume, because Frost claims to know everything about Blade, but really he only knows. It's that sort of thing when you pretend that you know a lot about something, but really like hey, have you read The Stand? Oh yeah, totally. No, like I've watched the movie, or I read the back of the jacket, or I read a review. You know,
saw
like
an
you didn't
ad for it.
actually,
Yeah,
you
not
didn't
the same.
actually, like, you know, the gist of it. Like he tells Blade he knows everything about him, and then proceeds to like just tell him the most basic information about Blade, that Whistler exists, that he has a serum, and then that's kind of like a full amount of what he knows. And it's later exposed how little he actually knew because he couldn't recognize the serum when he saw it.
He is kind of if Dunning-Kruger took human, well, not human form. That's if Dunning-Kruger were a person, that's who that would be.
It's Dorfman-Kruger. It's a Dorfman-Kruger effect.
Nice. You didn't even know I was going to do that.
I didn't.
You just came up with it.
It
wow.
would work even better if it wasn't the name of the actor; it was the name of the character.
Oh,
like,
yes. Well,
Deacon Kruger effect's not as good as Dorfman-Kruger.
No.
Effect.
Okay. Well.
But yes, but that's basically what happens in the movie. You know, Blade wins the day and moves on without Whistler. Now with the assistance of Karen, who is the name of the woman that he saved and that cured herself of vampirism, we assume with the assistance of her.
It amuses me that her name is Karen. I mean, like there was no way to, you know, it's just, it's
Karen
funny,
didn't mean anything back then.
No.
But yeah, the kind of the end of the movie is her asking, you know, what is Blade going to do? What she can do to help him fight the vampires. And he basically says, make me a better serum. So that, because right now he's just making it out of like garlic extract and like, you know, rosemary and wolfsbane and whatever.
He doesn't want to be cured. He wants to keep the vampire powers so that he can go on fighting.
Yes, exactly. Vampires. Yeah, because she thinks she could cure him with enough time. She was able to cure herself because she was made a vampire. She wasn't born a vampire. And it was early enough in the cycle that she was able to cure herself. But that's the ins and outs of the movie. This movie is so we had a little time between when we watched and when we had a chance to record. So we watched a little. We tried to watch a synopsis, but ended up sort of watching a video. There's a YouTube creator who has a series called Good Bad Flicks, and he kind of does a sort of an overall overview of the movie itself, not the events of the movie, but like how it got made, some of the little behind the scenes things, the sort of stuff that would normally I would have like in my quiver as trivia. He's basically hitting those same sources and then making a video about it. But you know, one of the things that was mentioned in there, and that was I was planning to mention too, that I thought was significant about this movie, is how important it actually is in the lineage of superhero movies and like what we see today. So I know you don't know this, and maybe some of the audience doesn't know this, but Marvel was horrible at making anything but comics out of their properties. Action figures were generally considered bad. Their attempts at cartoons were not great, although I have a fond place in my heart for like the old Spider-Man and cartoon and stuff from the 70s and whatever. But they were never good at it, to the point where they effectively just gave up and started selling the rights to the movie rights to many of their characters to other studios. Sony famously still owns Spider-Man and the whole Spider-Man universe. For a long time, 20th Century Fox owned and would still own the X-Men and the X-Men universe. So terms like mutant were off limits for Marvel to use in movies.
Oh wow!
Yeah, because they existed in the properties. You know, mutant was exclusively a term that was used to describe the superhumans that existed in the X-Men universe, or the X-Men type of superhuman. You know, Captain America had a serum. Spider-Man got radiation, the radiated spider. Hulk got radiated. Mutants are just born that way. It's a chromosomal genetic condition that gives them their powers. So yeah, they were famously bad at turning their properties into anything else, but even their video games were almost exclusively bad. So they gave up. They were just like, no, we're done trying to do this. We're just giving up. And hey, you know, 20th Century Fox, pay us a bunch of money for X-Men. You know, Sony, New Line Cinema, you guys want to pay us for these other characters? I think Blade is New Line. And so people didn't really put a lot of stock in what this movie was going to be. There hadn't really been any good superhero movies. There was a very famous Fantastic Four movie that ended up being so bad that it never even got out there before eventually I think Fox bought the rights to the Fantastic Four. And this movie did really well. Like, it was a big success. It was a hit, and it really made people understand that you could make a good superhero movie, but you had to respect the source material. You had to make a good movie in the first place. I think that so often is whatever it is, whether it's bringing a book to film or a video game or a movie or a comic book. You've got to remember you got to make a good movie in all this, and it doesn't matter if you hit all. You could make a movie that is 100% faithful to the source material of a book, and still make a bad movie, because what makes a good book doesn't necessarily make a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it's incredibly difficult to adapt something between mediums like that. And they successfully did it. And this started the march that would end in the current Marvel Universe. The success of this spurred on the success of an X-Men movie that would be released in the next year or two. And the second Blade movie was even more well-received. Future X-Men movies were well-received. And then in 2008, we get the beginning of the Marvel Universe, and we are now where we are with those sorts of movies. So yeah, you can't underestimate, or you can't understate the significance of this movie as a comic book movie. I would also argue that 4 years before this, The Crow was possibly the first good comic book adaptation.
I was getting a lot of Crow vibes from this.
Yes,
too.
yes. Well, that's the 90s vibes too.
Okay.
But The Crow was made from an independent comic, a character that was virtually unknown before the movie was made to everybody but diehard comic book fans. Even me, who was a diehard comic book fan in the early 90s, only knew The Crow by having seen the book on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a fan of it. It never compelled me enough to buy it, to spend my money on it. So yeah, it's huge. And, I think that's due in part to a lot of things. I think, it's written by David S. Goyer, who wrote a lot of modern superhero stuff, a lot of the DC movies like the Man of Steel and stuff like that. Wrote Dark City, which is one of my top 5 or 10 favorite movies of all time, which was Alex Proyas' follow up to, The Crow. So we will watch that at some point. It was the movie that he made after he made The Crow. An extremely skilled sci-fi and action adventure writer. Look up his work. He's done a ton. He wrote The Dark Knight Returns with the Heath Ledger Joker.
Okay.
And Stephen Norrington directed this movie, who I feel like got kind of shafted in Hollywood because there are several of these directors over time who have, Phil Tippett is one, who started out in special effects and ended up as directors. And Norrington is one who made the transition and then transitioned back. He worked on Gremlins. He worked on a ton of movies. He was big into animatronics and robotics.
Mm-hmm.
He worked on hardware in the 80s, 90s. He worked on a ton of cool sci-fi and action movies, and made the leap into directing with this and with a movie called Death Machine before this. And then his final movie was League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which I don't know if you know about that movie, but that movie is a legendary Hollywood flop. I believe it's the last movie that Sean Connery ever did. And it was an attempt at a comic book adaptation. And I guess they assumed, hey, this guy's done this before.
It's in the X-Men loop, isn't it?
No, I think it's its own thing.
Okay.
It's it's the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is like the Invisible Man and it's a bunch of characters.
You could say anything at this point, because I don't.
Yeah. But it was a horrible flop.
Okay.
And apparently ended his directing career. So no one since then has given him the money to direct, or the confidence to direct. But I think it was within his hands that this movie became the success that it did, because he had a vision for it. And then Goyer, as the screenwriter, was able to bring it along. So, it was kind of lightning in a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some levels, even though Stephen Norrington is not a superstar director, he was incredibly talented and perfect for this job. And you've seen Marvel do that. as they have been very specific about giving specific directors movies that are really good for them. Recently, when they gave Sam Raimi the reins to the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness movie, you know, picking really good directors, Coogler for Black Panther, you know, they've had a string of picking the right directors for the right movies. And then they don't always hit, but and I think this movie was kind of one of those. It was the correct writer and the correct director and the correct star, and it led to the success. And I think the last thing I wanted to bring up, because I think this to me is a bigger topic, is Snipes. I think he's great in this movie. He is Blade, like personified. You know, so much of what Blade is in the comics after this is Wesley Snipes' performance in this movie. It's, you know, when you can have a character be so well defined in one of its adaptations that the original version of that character is changed to match that adaptation, I think you did something right.
Yeah. Yeah, I was noticing the video that we were watching had some stills from the early graphic novels, and I thought that doesn't look like.
Yeah, no,
like,
he
like
he looks like Jim Brown and like, you know, like early like Mario Van Peebles and stuff like he's. But
then later it did look more like him.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, 100%. As it got into the 90s, it started to look a little more the flat top and the stuff. But the portrayals really became more Snipes-ish after. But yeah, I think, you know, Wesley Snipes, the whole reason we're watching this is because we just recently watched Demolition Man. You know, it's just another good performance by Snipes. And unlike Simon Phoenix, he's incredibly restrained in this movie because that's the character, you know. So again, the sign of a good actor.
Yeah. You know? I don't think that I had actually seen him in anything now that I think about it. I always knew of him.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'd ever seen any of his movies. And now I'm like, I need to watch a lot more of them. This is, I think, really enjoyable.
For me, the Snipes trifecta is Demolition Man, Blade, and White Men Can't Jump. That's
I haven't seen that.
That's another really good performance by him. And it's that, you know, that is a movie where it's not about the physicality. Like, it's about the acting there. I mean, it is, they play basketball in that movie, so there's some physicality. But
no roundhouse kicks in basketball.
Yeah, no roundhouse kicks. Yeah, a lot of roundhouse kicks in this movie.
Wasn't there one scene where it was two people roundhousing each other,
yes,
but they were too far apart, so it's just like haymakers.
Yeah, Blade and another vampire that he's fighting just roundhouse at each other. That's a popular thing in wrestling, is when two guys do drop kicks where they jump up and try to kick, and they just kick at each other's feet. It was like that, and it's like neither one of them are close enough that they would have hit the other. And it's that. Yeah, they were like, there was a good 1.5 feet between their feet, let alone between their faces or their bodies where they would have been aiming to kick.
Looks impressive, but not very lethal.
Yeah. So I mean, I've been talking a lot. I need to break here. Why don't you tell me your overall thoughts on the movie? Just anything, you know, we have some topics on the board, but just like, don't feel constrained by them.
Yeah.
Just what did you think about this movie?
Well, yeah, we've watched a lot of vampire movies in the sort of the arc of our podcast, not just the Dracula ones that we watched for Spooktacular, but some other ones too. And I'm just realizing the vampire lore is different in every single one. Somewhere there's the explanation that if you can kill the vampire who bit you, then it controls your vampirism.
That's a pretty common one.
And that didn't come up. And also we did kill the vampire that bit Karen, but it's still, you know, I don't know. Does that mean that, that the vampire legend is more or less likely to be true if there's different explanations of it? I can't decide.
It's a good question, but yeah, it is. I think it's fun because the vampire legend is so open to interpretation.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of wiggle room with werewolves.
Yeah.
You know, like, so it's, or like, you know, Frankenstein's monsters, like it's a certain set of circumstances that have to occur, but there's not a lot, like, you know, vampires have, or werewolves will forever be weak to silver, and, you know, have their whole transformation, but there's not a lot of other lore. And I think, because the vampire stuff is so much based on folklore, and folklore can be different from region to region.
Yeah. Well, and I like the idea of there being, that's them Eastern European vampires. They do blah, 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 blah. But our people moved here 1,000 years ago, and we do blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, totally. And I love there was a comment in the video we watched made by one of the writers of like, why would a Jewish vampire recoil at the sight of a cross? Like, right. Now, there are several different vampire universes and lineages that trace vampires back to Judas. And that's why they recoil from the cross, regardless of their religious faith. Their blood comes from, from the ultimate sinner or whatever you want, whatever. So that's an explanation people have come up with. That is not Romanian lore at all. But yeah, it's really cool because it's kind of a thing that the people have taken ownership of, like modern people have taken ownership of. It's an ancient tradition or superstition that we have just run with, and it's really, you can have almost any interpretation. I mean, there's just a small handful of unbreakable rules, which I really think is only they've got to drink blood. They don't even have to die in the daylight, but they can just sparkle.
Vampires don't die because of sunblock.
These guys use sunblock.
Yeah.
Or just and it is that's the cool thing, because they just wear the sunblock helps some in certain levels, and then beyond that they need to wear just UV protection. Like they can wear a leather biker suit with a face shield that is going to break out the UV, and then that's it. They're good.
Well, me being a bit of a skincare nerd, I was like, is that chemical sunscreen or physical sunscreen? Because physical sunscreen will create a physical barrier, but chemical sunscreen reacts with your skin.
Well, and I wonder because it is when he is supposed to have sunscreen on, even his lips are white. So I wonder if their indication
that
is
would be sort
and
of
he's incredibly pale,
zinc oxide thing
that he actually has a physical barrier.
There you go. Okay,
yeah.
My one skincare nitpick of this check. We're good.
But yeah, it is really cool because you have movies where so this is one of the things I wrote on the board, that these guys have limited weaknesses versus the superstitious vampires. Like superstitious vampires can't come in your house unless they're invited. They can't cross running water. Garlic or wolfsbane makes them recoil. Wooden stakes to the heart. Cut off their head.
I did like the vampire mace though, that has that super intense garlic. So
that's a super cool idea.
Anything. Yeah.
So that gets me to the yes, these vampires specifically, their weaknesses are sunlight, garlic, and silver. Which again, in some of the vampire universes, the reason that vampires are allergic to silver is because 30 pieces of silver, and the reason that wood can kill them is because of the cross, the wood of the cross of the crucifixion.
Interesting.
And I don't know in this universe, but that's usually that is the explanation I have heard in a couple of different universes for why silver specifically has causes a problem for vampires, because it's 30 pieces of silver, yada yada. But yeah, so these vampires have pretty limited weaknesses. So specifically, I don't know for sure. I guess silver doesn't work on Blade because he gets stabbed with a silver, one of his own silver crosses. And most of these vampires, when they get stabbed with a silver cross, they immediately just go up in a whirlwind of ash. And he gets stabbed with a silver cross and it doesn't. So I'm guessing he's not allergic to that. He's not allergic to the garlic, because they're injecting some form of garlic to keep his thirst down.
But then it seems to be painful though. So I wonder if that's like the pain is while your body struggles and is like, I don't like this. Okay. But
yeah, I mean, it's the difference between getting a hive from something and your throat closing up. Probably.
Yeah.
And he's immune to the sunlight. So the weakness that he seems to have is the need to drink blood. Everything else that kills them, we don't know. Presumably Blade can be killed somehow. I don't know. But yeah, so it's interesting to kind of pull away a lot of that stuff. I do like when movies like something like Lost Boys or something, they do try to retain and respect a lot of that stuff. but it's fun when a movie like this is just like, no, we're going to keep a couple of simple things, which almost makes it all the more believable. You know,
Yeah.
when you take out stuff like running water and being invited in your house and stuff.
It can kind of go either way. I feel like I said, like, does this make it more believable if everything is the same, or is it less because stuff changes over time?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about this movie. I think the one thing that we probably do need to talk about is how 90s it feels to someone who lived through the 90s. Like I said, I've said on several different occasions, a lot of times when you get a retrospective version of the past, it doesn't match. When someone in the 70s who was watching Happy Days was critiquing that for not really being, that's not really how it was in the 50s. Somebody in the 90s who was watching that 70s show is looking at that going, that shirt was not, that designer didn't exist. You can nitpick all this stuff. And when, especially recently when people have gone back to the 90s or the 80s, especially with trends in music, with stuff like synth wave and stuff like that, you're like, yeah, that's not really how music sounded in the 80s.
I'm looking forward to more 90s stuff when I can go, that's not.
But
Trust me.
But this is the time capsule stuff that you really want. Like, what you really want is a movie that was made in the time, responding to the time. And this is at the end of the 90s, in 97, 98. We're around the time of The Matrix. I'm not sure, is The Matrix 99? I can never remember.
It was, yeah.
So like we're right, which, we're just reinforcing the things that The Matrix is going to do in a year, how accurate those were to the time.
Long leather coats are apparently
leather coats, the fashions, the things that the vampires are wearing in the club scene in the beginning, they all feel very 90s goth. The song, of course, and other techno songs that are in this movie, they're all spot on with the techno stuff that was happening. I mean, of course they are, because they're contemporary. But this movie has such a great, it's such a great time capsule, but it also has a lot of that Crow-like, sort of nihilistic, sort of depressing. The streets are always littered with trash, and it's just, they're in, wherever they are, Chicago, New York.
It was hard to tell. There was one scene that looked like it was on a beach, but then the sun was coming up, so it could be. At first I assumed it was New York, but then it
has a New York feel.
It felt so Crow-ish that I was like, well, maybe it's Detroit.
Yeah, it could be Chicago. It's and it also, maybe it's just any city USA. Like, it's not meant. They're in Chinatown a lot. It's in this movie, but it has that sort of dark outlook on the future that some people had in the 90s. This is like around or post tech bubble, the first tech .com bubble kind of time. So
I hardly saw any areas of this city where people are living happy and normal lives, like even in the background of what the vampires are
exactly
doing.
And that's why I think, like, I feel like it's a very 90s, like the one place that's quote unquote happy or nice looking is the park where Frost kidnaps a girl to hold hostage to negotiate with Blade.
Traumatizes her for life.
Right, by throwing her like full speed through like a hot dog cart.
Yeah,
it's amazing the way that all goes. But yeah, like the style, the music, just the overall feel and like the attitude of the world and the people in it. Very, just give me the 90s vibes, and as it should, because it's set in the 90s. But these are the kind of things where, you want to point people to this. Like there are movies in the 70s that I would want to point that were made in the 70s. Like, if you really want to know what the 70s were like, watch that movie. If you really want to know what the 80s were like, watch this movie. And this is one of those movies where if you really want to know what like the last half of the 90s was like, this is, like a lot of people were wearing leather and experimenting with, a lot of white people had dreads and braids, and facial piercings were becoming a thing.
Yeah.
You really want to feel the 90s. The first 20 minutes of Blade is going to really get you there.
There's nothing wrong with facial piercings.
No, not at all.
What was I gonna? Oh, yeah. So these elaborate prophecies, or like if you turn the gears of this mechanism this way, tick, tick, tick. Why are they always so effing complicated?
Right.
And why would these 12 pure blood vampires, first of all, not know about this and know to stay far away from this? Why would they go and just stand there and waiting for their, like, this is overly complicated.
They force them to stand there. But also, I believe the ancient tradition, they would have been voluntarily doing this because they would have wanted to bring about the return of La Magra. So I would assume, but yeah, it's I think the idea that they're trying to reinforce is the current vampire elders have basically, and their predecessors have forced this stuff to be forgotten. That they keep the pages of their ancient vampire Bible under lock and key with limited access. They have let this temple site where the finale of the movie takes place
get it bricked over or something.
Completely be abandoned and forgotten about. They have purposely let all this past be forgotten in service of the alliance with the humans and with their own greed. That they would understand, and their lineage would understand, that in order for La Magra to be reborn, it requires them to sacrifice themselves. And then while that will bring about the vampire apocalypse and, create a dominant race of vampires. And basically the idea behind La Magra is he will turn every human into a vampire. And
So it's
Frost,
better for everybody.
right. And Frost wants this because he's not a pureblood, and the purebloods don't want this because they want the pureblood. So they would consider, turning every human into a vampire to be turning them to a bunch of substandard vampires.
Yeah, it just seems like, who would have come up with this? What's in it for them? And it's
nothing
it's
is in it.
very complicated. Like you take your Snipes character, Blade, the half human, half vampire, lock him in this Iron Maiden thing.
Yeah.
His wrists are slit. Is it only from the wrists?
It looked like it was.
Yeah. So a very slow desanguinization, bloodletting process. And it drips down, it goes through all these tubes, and it's like clinging to the roof of this temple by surface tension. And then it gets to one part and then it drops, and like a drop of that blood hits the pure blood vampires on the forehead because they're all looking up. Going,
the drop that solidifies is the drop that hits Frost. But
still,
Snipes' blood drips down and drips onto them.
And then as soon as it hits them, they explode.
A gargoyle skeleton comes out of their bodies, a spirit gargoyle skeleton thing.
It's a gnarly death. Yeah.
I like that it like actually the hands reach out of their mouths and like pull their skin.
It's not. Yeah, you would not volunteer for this. I don't think.
No.
And then the drop hits Frost on the forehead, and he's and I just.
Yeah.
Most prophecies, I take issue with this. I feel like they're all going to be much more simple than that. Like, mix two things in a tube. Done.
Yeah. Well, you get the idea that like La Magra maybe is referencing like Aztec blood rituals, or these which were ritualistic in nature, and they had all these temples and all these things. So you kind of. Okay, if you're tracing these back and you're thinking about all these ancient blood sacrifices and blood rituals, including ancient Jewish blood rituals and all these other things, all these old religions, they all had blood sacrifice and blood rituals, whether it was human blood or animal blood.
Okay, except I belong to the faith that has like one of the OG blood rituals, and we don't have any of these steps.
Well, to have a blood ritual now in the Christian faith would be heretical, because the blood ritual to which you're referring was the one to end all blood rituals.
Well, but that's what I'm saying is like, it's wine, boom, it's blood. Like, it's very simple.
Right,
There's
but
none of these steps.
Right, but I'm saying the reason that you don't do, but also like there's a guy that walks around with an incense burner and swings it around,
That's
and
not all the time.
another guy that carries a cross and they say things in Latin, and
Those are special occasions.
I know, but so this is a special occasion too. This is the rebirth of the blood
I don't
god.
stand there waiting for blood drops to go on my forehead.
But you might if you were the chosen one. How do you know what it's going to be like when Jesus comes back? Maybe a drop of blood is going to drip from the finger of God at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel and fall onto Pope Benedict's head because he's somehow resurrected.
Right. But also, we don't do things to bring God back. Like, we don't know when it's going to happen. So anyway, I'm just saying, it feels very much like...
How would you know if it's an ancient ritual if it wasn't extremely complicated and weird and nearly impossible?
Well, it's interesting. Like, we like to think of ancient people as very simple, but yet when they make rituals or codes, it's always 12 times more complicated than what we would do. It's like the Da Vinci Code and National Treasure. Yes. And it's, like multiple continents involved in these things. And I'm like, they didn't have telephones or airplanes when they put this stuff together. How did they come up with this?
But they had nothing but time, right? Without Twitter and Facebook and TikTok, they had nothing but time. So planning an entire city to show somebody a map of, whatever, like they had nothing but time.
So if we didn't have TikTok, we would have a whole lot more coded maps.
Or Facebook.
I could take that trade-off.
Yeah.
I want more, I want, when you are going to the grocery store, I want to be able to make you a coded map.
Right.
It's like, and go to the northeast corner where you will find the elixir that is made from the milk of cows. It's actually just milk, but you must get the coldest one, the one that is at the temperature of, I don't know. I'm not good at coming up with this on the fly. But.
Clearly because of Facebook and
right.
And TikTok and Instagram. Like, this is right. Like, this is a skill that we have lost as a people. The ability to create overly complex rituals.
That's
like
true.
You can't even riff one out when you're trying to.
I really can't.
It's really a sad state.
I'll try to come up. I'll try to come up with one later. Next time you go to the store, I'm going to give you a very complex list.
I hope so. The last thing we'll talk about real quick before the end is, like I was saying, Stephen Norrington is the director of this movie, which leads to so many of the special effects being really good and really well conceptualized. There's a cool scene near the end. We talked about the stuff that violently reacts with vampire blood. When a couple of those vampires get killed with that stuff, there's a cool transformation scene that in retrospect looks dated, but like as a special effect actually still looks pretty good. And then they blow up and there's, blood slops everywhere and, covers the walls. Like, it's really cool. There's really cool stuff. A lot of the practical stunts are really cool. And even some of the CGI stuff, like we were watching a quick little behind the scenes thing, and there's a scene where they fight near a train, subway train. And at one point, Quinn, who's again is Frost's like second in command. There's an ongoing sort of comedy thing with Quinn getting dismembered and beat up and messed up. He gets his hand, he gets completely burned up.
Yeah.
And early on, he loses a hand, he loses another arm.
Grows things back, although not.
And they're kind of weird.
Yeah.
And there's a point where his face gets shoved into the passing train cars and like gets, like, and like a bunch of it gets shaved off. But like that whole train was CG. Like that was, and you never,
oh, wow.
I never even would have guessed.
Yeah.
I thought, well, maybe it's just two elements filmed, maybe separate times, whatever. Cause obviously they're not going to put actors within inches of a speeding subway train. But yeah, that stuff was just really unnoticeable. And that's when special effects are at their best, when you don't notice them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one that is super noticeable, that everybody is kind of the meme from this movie, the thing that everybody makes fun of as far as the special effects, is when Frost has had the complicated blood droplet fall on him. He becomes La Magra. He has the final fight with Blade. And Blade, basically dispatches him very quickly by just like ninja or samurai chopping him in half. Like right at the waist, just bisected. His upper half flips into the air while his legs are still standing there. And then a 90s ass CGI blood glob snakes out of his upper body and lower body and connects together and pulls him back together. And it's some of the worst CG.
It was kind of like a Saturday morning cartoon effect.
Yes. It was and it's the kind of thing where it lets the movie down.
Mhm.
Like it's the kind of thing where it would have been better without that. Like I get that you wanted to sell it, but like a better way to sell it might have even just been to have him chop off Frost's head and then Frost's body just walk over and put his head back on.
Mhm.
You know, like something cool like that. But yeah, it's one of the worst special effects of the 90s, unfortunately. And I hate that this movie gets saddled with it because it's one of the things that people kind of remember.
Mhm.
And I think it's the reason that this movie gets lumped into that good, bad flicks kind of world because of a couple of special effects that aren't up to par. But, you know, overall, this movie is just, the special effects are just wonderful, especially the practical stuff. And the best special effect in this movie that was revolutionary at the time and only now really starts to show its age and like some of the seams around the edges is when he silver stakes the vampires and they turn into skeletons and ash all in this big, you know, that's all CGI when that happens on every one of those.
Mhm.
And it's so good. It's one of the best special effects of
Yeah.
the 90s.
Yeah, that was nicely done.
And it's
Yeah.
seamless. And like I was talking about the other special effect with the train, it's unnoticeable. And it's so good and it sells it so well. It was the coolest way a vampire's ever died on film, you know,
Mhm.
just like the normal vampire death. Because, you know, most of the time it's, you know, stab them and they
Yeah.
might, you know, turn to dust or whatever, you know, but this was like, boom, just like a whirlwind of fire and dust. And they're just
Well,
bones left behind.
There are some professions, and I am in that profession, and you are too, to a degree, and where if you do your job well, nobody notices. If you
Yeah.
do it badly, everybody notices.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is one of them.
For sure. And and I think you can't mention this movie and not talk about this movie and not mention Chris Christopherson,
Mhm.
the country singer,
Yeah.
who is in, you know, to his credit, Chris Christopherson was in a lot of westerns and stuff and like TV movies like Lonesome Dove type stuff in his day. But
yeah,
just
I think of him as an actor more than a singer.
Yeah.
Just because
But
of what I've been exposed to.
just
But
gives a great performance as this like haggard old you know, sort of semi-retired cowboy kind of
Mhm.
Van Helsing character. And he's got, you know, something on his leg and you're never quite sure. And he tells a story about a vampire drifter. And you think, you know, you make your little headcanon of like, oh, you know, he probably got that injury then and he's been
Mhm.
limping like that for decades. And yeah, he just knocks it out of the park.
Well, and his suicide is off screen. I mean, we hear it and it's like pretty much a given that he's going to do it, but we don't see it. And I wonder, was there a thought of bringing him back? Like, haha, I didn't actually die.
Well, guess what?
Oh, are we going to find out?
He comes back.
Great.
I don't know if it's the second movie or the third movie. And I don't remember the details of it because after the first movie, I've watched both of the other movies, but he does come back. I want to say he's a vampire and he's using the serum, but he's still doing the vampire hunting.
Does he still have the limp?
I don't know. I don't like. I wish I should have brushed up on this because I don't remember. But he does come back, and I can't remember. And the third movie, what I do remember, is the third movie is his daughter. Is it? It's Ryan Reynolds, and is it?
Oh, Jessica Biel.
Jessica Biel. She is his daughter. She's Whistler's daughter.
Okay.
In that movie,
who we thought was killed.
Yes, who we thought was killed. Or maybe another daughter. I don't know.
Okay. He's got chicks in every port.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
You know.
I mean, you know, it's Chris Christopherson.
I mean, in his youth, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so he does make a reappearance.
Okay.
He does, and his daughter makes an appearance in the third movie. The second movie is very weird, and I really like it. It introduces these new kind of vampires where like their faces open up, like really wicked crazy. And then like by the third movie, he's like, I think he's fighting like Dracula or something again, like the original vampire or something. And you know, Ryan Reynolds is quipping, and Triple H is in it, and Ron Perlman is in it. You know, like. You know, but you know, Blade actually has this like rich history of like secondary characters. He has the Darkstalkers is this group that he's in for a while, and he has all these like secondary characters and stuff. And it's, you know, it's a really cool little universe that he has, and they kind of try to play with that in the third movie. Though I don't know if any of those characters are officially any of the Darkstalkers or what. I don't remember.
Sometimes you have to learn to just let it go.
Yeah. But I think this franchise is at its best when it's Blade, when it's Snipes as Blade alone. But we're going to find out if it is or it isn't. Marvel is going to be bringing Blade into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Have you heard anything about this?
I know it exists, and I know it's the guy whose name I can't.
Mahershala Ali.
Thank you. I could
So-
pronounce Ali. I just couldn't pronounce the
he has already been introduced in the movie The Eternals, which was kind of a semi-flop movie, which I really liked from a few years ago now.
Oh my God. This is why I can't get into Marvel stuff, because there's so much
Right.
homework. Like you got to watch 4 movies back to get all the seeds that were planted
Yes,
for the one
yeah.
movie. I
But
can't do it.
he is introduced with a post-credit scene where he is coming to inquire about a sword that the Kit Harington is his character. That's the guy, right?
That's Jon Snow. That's all I know.
Yes, that guy. His character has a sword, and I think it's Excalibur or something. I don't remember. I don't actually remember the ins and outs of it. But yeah, so that's going to be the thing. He's going to be in the Marvel universe with some members of the Darkstalkers or some of the people of his orbit, the Blade orbit. They're going to do some stuff. I don't know if it's going to be Dracula or what they're going to do, but it should be fun. And when you see him sort of in the get up, like Ali really does, he gives you Snipes vibes.
Yeah,
Like he
I
gives
can
you
see that.
Snipes Blade vibes. So it could be really good. Although Snipes was still reportedly in good enough condition, he probably could have reprised the role.
I can't remember. He was at an awards show in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And he was super skinny.
Yeah.
And there was the whole dialogue was like, oh my gosh, what happened to Wesley Snipes? He looks terrible. Hey, wait a minute. Don't comment, because remember Chadwick Boseman, blah, 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 blah. And then we never found out what actually was
Right.
good,
Yeah. Well,
okay.
that, and like that guy in this movie, he's walking around with like probably 30 or 40 pounds of muscle on top of his, what he should normally be walking around at. That's not sustainable.
No, he looked frail.
But yeah, no, I remember seeing the pictures.
But also
and
it's been 30 years. So,
but yeah,
stuff happens.
I know 10 years ago or so, 8 or 10 years ago, he was in talks to maybe reprise the role. And now maybe he's too far. Yeah, maybe he's too old. Maybe he can't get back to the shape he was in. Maybe he doesn't have the ability to do a lot of the martial arts stuff. And also, there was a period where he was done with Blade. Like in the third movie, there's a funny story. Before we go real quick, there's a funny story about there was a scene where he was on a gurney and he was supposed to open his eyes. They think he's out, and then he's supposed to just, dramatic scene.
Yeah.
He opens his eyes and everybody's like, oh, he opened his eyes. He came on set and he refused to open his eyes. So they had to CG his eyes. Him opening his eyes.
Things to not want to do.
Because
Why?
he was like having disagreements with the director or the direction of the
geez.
movie, or he was just kind of over it with Blade and stuff like that. Yeah, would not open his eyes, and they had to CG his eyes opening.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, but it sounds like by 2015 he was at least willing to talk about the role.
Sometimes when you're down to only a few digits in your bank account,
Yes,
you're like,
yeah, and you never know with Snipes. I haven't really kept up with him. He had all the financial problems. Who knows?
you haven't kept up with him. You
I don't. We used to talk a lot, and then I just, he doesn't call me. I don't call him.
No,
It's
you gotta
it's just how
reach
you drift
out.
away from friends.
you
It's
got to reach
unfortunate,
out.
really.
You got to be a friend to have a
You
friend.
got to maintain. That's what I
Yeah.
keep telling you, Mary.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to go to the brewery.
Speaking of brewery, like that's the thing that people would go for today is you're at a club and beer rains down.
Oh, yeah.
And you could be like, go over in this corner and we'll have
It's
an
an
IPA.
IPA, yeah.
And over here is a stout. And I'll be over in the red lager all by myself because no one else wants the IPA corner will be very crowded.
Yeah, a lot of guys in flannel with beards.
Coughing, being
over
like,
in-
oh, this is awful. I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But Blade, that's Blade. It's another one of my dumb 90s action movies. The road is continuing to roll on here on the
Alright.
train of dumb 90s action movies.
Okay. And then, because we alternate hosting movies next time, I will be Giving Dave a dumb 90s rom-com, sort of. But though it's set in the past, so, it's history. That's how we justify it. We're going to be watching Far and Away.
Nice.
Tom Cruise doing a terrible Irish accent from the Kevin Costner school of accents.
Yep.
But to teenage me in 93, 94, whatever, it was great. So,
yeah, and I can't believe I've never seen that movie, but I've seen bits and pieces of it.
how have you never?
But yeah,
geez,
never.
yeah.
I never.
Well,
have seen
and our favorite Colm Meaney is in it.
Oh,
so
nice. That's great. Wonderful.
Exactly. See, it can't be bad. So
No.
But yes, our episodes come out every other Wednesday. So 2 weeks from today, no matter when you're listening, there'll be a new episode right in your queue. Next time, it's going to be Far and Away with me hosting. You can find that episode where you find all of our episodes on most of your major podcast providers, specifically Apple Podcasts. You can follow, subscribe, whatever to the feed, and you'll get the latest episodes right in your queue. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Our handle is YSMY Podcast for both of those. Find us on our feed. There'll be links to the episodes, or you can also DM us on those platforms if you have anything that you want to say. You can also send us an email, ysmypodcast@gmail.com. YSMY is for You Show Me Yours. We would love to know what you think about Blade or about any of the other movies we've talked about, or, is there something where you're like, you must have seen this movie, I need you to talk about it. Probably one or the other of us loved it as a teen, so we'll put it on the list. This has been You Show Me Yours. We'll see you next time with Far and Away. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
IPA corner over there.
Yeah.
I'm a vibing cat.
Yeah. They forgot they add the hand claps in there.
The You Show Me Yours theme song is Uplifting Electronic Indie by Winnie the Moog from filmmusic.io.
I'm trying to gear up to start so I don't have the...
Oh, I thought we were trying to avoid the...
Well...
But the...